is important because well, that carried me to look at design analysis as being one of the serious problems of system complexity. But okay, now, so what we have here is we have all these different simulations and models that complement experiments. As I mentioned before, there were experiments for the injectors, and there were simulation and models for speed. And in combustion instability, you want to have control mechanisms that is automate or makes it more autonomous in terms of controlling that kind of flow. And here you need comes with a what we call a flow solver, which and then but it's coupled to algorithms, and then it gets into the mathematics, and that and finally it gets into what we call computational fluid, computational fluid, CFD, computational fluid dynamics, I believe it is. Okay, great. So they have different codes for that. And the CFD codes, this is going to make more sense when we go further into talking about in orbit space assembly of space structures. Okay. So my next paper that I presented at National Society of Black Engineers was in 2018. And it was developing safety and technology innovation programs, a case study in rocket propulsion. Okay, you please go to the next slide here. So here we've already talked about the acoustic coupling, okay? And so now what we are, this was, okay. So now we're looking at, okay, this one before that. Okay, now, so here we talk about the input-output models of control routines. And that may be, and when you have problems with that, it may be due to a lack of filters for frequency oscillating perturbations or behaviors. Remember I said that some of these frequency oscillations have spikes, and that causes the combustion instability. Well, so you really need a control mechanism for that so that it will correct itself autonomously. But sometimes it doesn't. So there was a time period, about during that time period, they put sensors on everything. They wanted to sense. There was a parameter that was investigated, a parameter that should have been explored. They had a sensor for it. I mean, but in the problem with that sometimes is that the sensors are hard to locate. They're hard to access. But that's what you need. And so then we have what we call okay, can we go to the next slide? So then we started looking at 2020. I gave the most recent I gave here at the National Society of Black Engineers was adaptive safety management and commercial aerospace industry. Here we're talking about technical systems prone to failure, complex. They're tightly coupled systems, making the chain of bits for disaster incomprehensible to. Now we're talking about space operations. So with space operations, you're talking about tasks that need to be performed, and you're also talking about system users. And so the use of redundancy only exacerbates the problem and more complexity. So you used to say that, oh, just add the same thing, make it redundant, and that's a sure way of saving preventing or managing the risk. Okay, but softwares and the interactions with the hardware build systems with a lethal complexity and as well. And that intersection tries to occur among the components often controlled by software, and they cannot all be planned. or understood or anticipated. So the safety goals are structured locationally across the activities of the system life cycle, which we talked about, and of course a hierarchy of levels from the system components. And stakeholders negotiate this at each stage of the life cycle. Actually, it's even more so. I mentioned the last time in 2020 that essentially now safety management is taking another shift. It's becoming more like we know that stakeholders have the last word. We don't want to say, we don't want the stakeholders to say, okay, we're going to have this portion here for risk management, this portion devoted to this and that. We want to present our own case every step of the way along with the safety. So what we're doing is they're from a small component level, they're presenting safety mechanisms that can be proven and can be presented to the stakeholders every level. So this became part of my PhD dissertation. It was really looking at, well, there were two attempts with that. First attempt was technology acceptance of new technology or new systems. And the second one was, I couldn't find something in that. So I changed that. And that's when I came, of course, to a case study of combustion instability, because we have over 500 interviews at NASA archives in the history department. Their personal interviews working on the Apollo program, and I think they're working word for what they actually said in the interviews about combustion instability. That, and everyone who knows that if you're doing any kind of research, oh man, you do not want to go through surveys, and it's a lot of work. That streamlined my process really nice. It was accepted. Okay, next slide, please. Is that water? Well, yeah, I can just remember it. Right. So you talk this much, so my mouth gets dry real bad. And it's fun talking about things that about almost 2 years of my work. And that's just a psychographic engineers, I can't believe it. And it's amazing that all these things are presented right here. I can't believe it. And I started when I first started in 2010 in LA. And it's like, yeah, it's very, yeah. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Is I think you can drive the historical perspective, mission pull of archivist technologies. In general kind of way, using the solo is okay. Now, the next part what I'd like to do is the human machine interactions to HMI to artificial intelligence. The operations complexity with learning instances. So we're going to look at the ways that in which it starts off. Post-Apollo program, there were a few more Apollo missions. And so, hold that. Everyone is familiar with the International Space Station. We started off with in-orbit space ascending when we started to develop the International Space Station. It took 8 missions to do this. But the question is, it was heavily done with extravehicular activities by human astronauts. Question is, there were some problems with this. So we're going to talk about that. Now, there is paradigm shifts that go on in technology, and you have to make decisions, what not. It is worth us, whether it is worth sacrificing human life, human astronauts, or human health problems, or whether you'd rather have a machine to do it for them. And that's going to be that's where we're at now with Artemis mission. How are we going to develop or construct the trust to attach different modules and to the Space Station Trust of the Gateway. I want to talk about system of systems architecture and how we can do this with artificial intelligence on the space station. And so I'll make some general there. Together? Okay. Next slide. Oh boy. Oh, yes. These were the lessons learned, but I'm not going to go over this so much because we have gone over this before. Some keywords I want you to look at. Systems usage. That's basically operations. So you have a person that's standing in a machine, they have to do it, they have to perform some kind of task, they interact with the machine of some sort. Okay, now, what makes it worthwhile for this to be a successful task performance depends on whether that particular technology and the task that's been performed, whether that person who's doing this is fit for that. So we have a term called technology task fit. Okay. So now, if the technology task fitness for that particular astronaut is good and he's comfortable with that, then we can start looking at the human machine interactions and we can go say, okay, you're more capable than the next person in doing this. Systems technology acceptance. He has to feel comfortable doing this. But as we know, in the early days of the Apollo program, there were two main Johnson Space Center and Marshall Space Center and water tanks where they would practice building a truss for the space station, for the International Space Station. And it was for them to get used to the buoyancy, the gravity, and so on. And they compared this with different parameters of how long did it take them, how comfortable they were, and different parameters. And they wanted to compare that with actual in space assembly of International Space Station. So again, that's what with technology principles as well. Well, the astronauts started complaining. They said that first of all, there was too much handwork, and their hands got tired. There was just too much of it. Apollo 17 astronauts also said when they were on the moon that they had hand and wrist muscles fatigue. So they complaints of human operations on human machine interactions, which where the astronauts suffered in the EA. There are a lot of complaints they had, but I wanted to mention those two. So that's one thing of system system usage. And this is also comes back to what we were saying before, simulation instruction. So you want to try to do the same thing in a simulation kind of way before you actually take it in the real space domain environment. We mentioned evaluation changes that the hand and the wrist muscles indicate a need for greater knowledge sharing. And that was one of the topics I mentioned before, open innovation networks. I think it's 2014, maybe I probably didn't mention that. So when we talk about evaluation changes, I think I did mention, it's listed stakeholder analysis, and I did talk about that. And when we talk about stakeholder analysis, we really want to look at what does the stakeholder analysis say about the astronauts actually having their health, supposed initial health, being jeopardized, compromised. So, gives us another point. One, they can have a countdown shift. If we're going to do the same thing, then why do we need humans to do those particular mundane tasks? It sounds reasonable, but again, it's a paradigm shift, and also it represents technology acceptance of the stakeholders mostly, so that they can give the green light for that. So we've come to the point of robot machine interactions, and that's where we're at right now. So here we have the International Space Station where we can talk about human machine interactions. Now we can really start talking about robotic machine interactions or robotic interactions. Are we together now? Okay. Now, let's start here. Is part of the Rasmussen's hierarchy of system architecture. You start off at a very low level, elementary level, and the deeper or the more advanced the machine goes to, it goes to levels of complexity or levels of different kinds of sophistication, and maybe increase the number of component parts. Well, it's because a situation for situational awareness of the system user. Now, if you're just going to turn a switch, that's what we call a skill. Or it's a skill, versus a skill. But if there are problems, you have as we call it, target shooting guidelines. They are what we call rules, and you can follow those rules. Of course, it's a really big situation, and what we need knowledge, then I want to introduce a artificial intelligence agents. Okay. Surely, skills and rules come within the purview of standard operating procedures. Next slide, please. Okay. We're trying to do a simulation test for having EVAs for the International Space Station. You can see the two astronauts. One is tethered to the spacecraft itself. The other one is actually working on a work platform, and he's more. So you can see they have both. There are two. One is working at a platform close to where he has to work. The other one is loosely tethered to the spacecraft. This is what they had to erect the guide rails as well as the truss, and this is how they did it. And you can see it's in a tetrahedral kind of fashion, and then it would be better for them to erect it in space rather than them to deploy it. It's a whole complete unit to put in space, but of course, this has to be done in a water tank and to show the simulation of fidelity of how it would be if it were done in space. Next slide.
I'll go ask conference.
Move on a little bit, but this is basically how you look and how you're going to start off with trust, and then you have the guidelines on how you will build 10 days of this particular structure. This is a little bit more of a, if you can see this diagram, based on how it was when, okay, next slide, please. Here you can see, what you're going to see here, simulations and the time differences between those that were trained and those that were not trained, and you can see the difference, and those that were actually in space, and you can see that there was very little difference between the two results of assembling 10 days or disassembling 10 days and the scale of time. Next slide, please. Yeah. This becomes a robotic. Well, even with the International Space Station, they had a robotic manipulator arm, which could do a lot of the things. Now we're looking at where we can have where the robotic assistant can have more capabilities and can do more things. And so this is part of the NEM Excursion Overall Utility Volume 2 platform. And so do we need to have this instead of the human astronauts doing the EVAs? And that's a difficult question to add, because the next slide would show. Oh, next slide. Next slide. Okay, next. Okay, here we're going to have two different ways. We're going to have several ways in which we can look at the robots. We can have one that's fixed on the beginning thrust of a. We can have a flying one, and then we can have one that's a hauling one, and they work and together to be able to create a total robotic assembly. Okay. Okay. So that's actually with the one with the trust and the gateway with the trust. But the other one is notional. Someone came up with a design saying that why don't we just put the modules and connect them together? Like beginning to think in terms of modules being connected together and being able to build up the system that way. Next slide, please. Okay, this goes into a little bit more detail. And we'll show you a little bit more of how they're using the trust bay with the different crawling robotic systems, the stationary robotic systems, and the free flying robotic systems that you don't see, but it's there. Next slide, please. Okay, so the gateway is going to test technologies and operational procedures requiring new technologies. I just gave you a list of the new technologies here that was mentioned in the technology roadmap and that's put out. And there's 17 altogether. And these are some of the primary robotic technologies that will be employed. Next slide, please. Right. We mentioned also about the controls and how we had sensors to almost detail almost to monitor the behavior of operations that are occurring. And hopefully that they will stop or they will identify different anomalies. Well, so this was, so what we have here, we have the generic term of a safety instrumented system, which will which will read the monitors and will make a decision themselves with itself as to what to do, whether to open the valve or close the valve or what have you. That would be a very simple control loop, and that's with so I mentioned this, but there are so many control loops and something that's massive as the gateway. It probably needs I think this is where we come in with artificial intelligence. First, looking at all the different parameters, looking at all the different data, see if there are trends or trends between the behaviors based on the intersection of these parameters, and being able to create models more comprehensive than models before. Okay, next slide, please. So we're looking at how this was interesting in the sense that you probably, when you do your research, you probably go through a literature research search, and you look at, and sometimes it goes into, as you can see what I've done, it goes through different topics. It's an intersectionality of different kinds of areas, and you want to see whether they connect or not. Well, what you can do is in artificial intelligence, you can have agents that can peruse all these documents that's related or unrelated, and to find out similarities between them to see if there is any kind of connection, and no matter how remote it is. This is where we come in with the design analysis I was telling you about. A lot of times with design analysis, we look at clusters of design elements to make a product. But there are also some critical ones that are outliers. And as impact with clusters of design elements, same with what artificial intelligence agents are doing. They may be finding some very remote outline references that can be used, no matter how remote it is. And when you simulate it or test it, it gives you data that you can see trends for. And this builds up more knowledge trees for control loops. And so, to skip, next slide. Oh, okay, yeah. So this just basically shows you a little bit more of how artificial intelligence agents actually work. Next slide. You're probably familiar with this. Oh man, this is the ARMOR program. I mean, I think artificial agents could use this because it shows central tendency between different topics, different things that they can find. And you can see the centralities of different, of how they can find different clusters or how they can find different relatedness between the different things they will find collect amongst the data. And it's a useful, it is, I've actually used it before. I've actually used it before. And okay, I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this shows you a little bit of the trends and how you can see that if you do have the data, strength of the dependency, how one parameter can be dependent on another parameter results. And then if you have enough data to show these parameter trend lines, then you can look at the criticality of the system or the parameters. And that's another thing about artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Okay, and for conclusion, so I want to thank you. I mean, oh man, I didn't know it was going to be an hour. That's what half an hour. But you know, I'm sort of, you know, I'm sort of excited about it because I think that when you're working on something, you go deeper and deeper and deeper. It's really like, I don't know, it's, you know, it just adds to the storyline. And that's the way I look at science. And because I can say that I'm a journalist, I'm always looking for a storyline. And science investigation for me, I think that somehow or another, I don't know how I got into that, but it really started me being a secretary for 7 years for Orange County section of the AIAA. And it has led me to be now, 10 years later, editor-in-chief of a journal. It's exciting for me, and I find joy in what I do. And with that, we're listening, and Darren was over there, and thank you. We're not seeing it. Yes,
Sorry, I know we're out of time. I just have
Yeah.
not so much a comment, the question, but a comment. And I know it's probably journalistic neutrality, but I think it would be good for your next audience, right? To maybe prod some thinking around in what parameters or what context is AI better than human interaction. I know you didn't give your personal opinion. I understand that, but I think for your next audience, that might be a good point.
the strength of dependency among the different parameters,
Like
data.
prioritizing in which parameter AI should trump human
Right.
interaction or vice.
Well, when I found this, it was basically with government. Okay, we talk about stakeholders, right? Okay.
They're looking at me because we're out of time. I don't need to get us in trouble. We can talk offline.
Okay. Wait, why would make this thing? Governance is very important. So we have lots of different standard reports. And so those reports are what the AI agents are looking at to try to bring that in with the technological roadmap, the different technologies that are presented on there. And that's what they're looking at to try to show. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.